Can you give some tips about marketing or telling stories across cultures? That's essentially what you're proposing. So some tips about telling stories across culture that will resonate with a demographic does not share your same cultural experiences.
So our specific, just to personalize it to this show, our model in producing the show was number one, to get talent from the top institutions in the U.S. media market, and then two, to partner with creatives in country, each place we go, to help tell that story. Because I think in telling a cross-cultural story, it's really frickin' hard. It's been done, and we are endeavoring to do it with the utmost integrity and diligence possible, but it's really difficult to do that. The audacity to go into another place around the world, and we're looking at the 7 food wonders, so it's not only West Africa, but any other place, it's not my own. So I think that's a really key part of it to me, and one example of sorts and inspiration is Bourdain. And if you're unfamiliar, Anthony Bourdain was a chef, and then he had a show with CNN, Parts Unknown, No Reservations, and went around the world and told a lot of these stories that are really hard to tell because they were about parts unknown that people didn't have great understanding of. At a core, we have so much more that unites us than divides us. And I think, Achumboro, to your question about cross-cultural stories, what I've found, and part of the reason that I love this work so much, is that even though I was born in this very humble, modest place, without a lot of access, the first time that I traveled, said, okay, well, whatever you do, just don't eat any of the fish because you know they don't cook it there. And I was like, what are you talking about? Oh my gosh, they're like, well, if you eat it, you know, you'll get sick and die because it's not cooked. And I am freaking out. I'm like, I'm about to get on this plane. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just a girl. I can't eat the fish. What if I die? And I'm just having a total crisis. I'm panicked. Who are these people and why don't they cook their fish? So then, needless to say, I got to Japan, tried the fish. It wasn't cooked. I didn't die. It was delicious. And I was amazed. And I came away from that experience just thinking that I was high. Oh my gosh, I'm like, where else can I go? What else is out there? The world is wide and I want to get to it. Remembering as much as possible to listen to the person across from you and to withhold judgment and see what you can learn. And I think if you go into any new space, my posture when I go into any new place and endeavor to tell that story is not to tell people what their story is, it's to listen and to be really curious. And then the very last thing that I would say is anytime I go into telling a story in a new place or into a new room like this, my posture is not, let me tell you what I'm doing. I am telling you a lot of what I'm doing because of this format, but if I can help you, number one, awesome, because that's gonna make me feel great. But number two, we can do so much more together. And so I think that posture going into every story that we're telling, that's ultimately the foundation of why I'm doing any of this. Not to wax poetic, but we're on this planet for a very short time, only once. And what do you want to do with your time? So on that slight sermon note, my dad was a preacher, so pardon me, I'll pass the mic.
It's very difficult to go after a great speaker.
You're doing great.
I'm going to leave you with a very data-driven response. And please allow me to do this. I spend a significant amount of time looking at data and trying to find connections. Right now, I'm engaged in deploying capital to an East African country, and the challenge is finding a partner who would be keen on investing or importing products and services from the United States. So let me go back to data. There is such a great symbiotic relationship between the culture in the United States and the culture in the 55 member states of Africa. If you go look at the survey, the things that are being asked, the Africans have a fundamental respect for the liberal democracy that they see from the United States. What's very interesting is they caught all these feelings, these insights from the media, from Hollywood, from seeing the way people relate to the apps, the way the Apple or the Android apps are created. They are very different from the apps that would come from China, that are a little restrictive, that are not based on demand and supply. My point is this: the media has a fundamental role to play in being very deliberate in how it engages with the continent. The African continent is ready to consume, but guess what? Africans are such capitalists that if you bring a product that is not localized or based on their needs, you're not going to be successful. If you want to see what the Africans are consuming, they're consuming local-made TV shows, things in the local language, things that they understand, short videos that they can look at with a deep message. That's demand and that's supply. It all is based on the investments that have been made by the Americans into the media. I'm basically asking people to invest their time in the media in deliberately changing the opinions. Thank you.
So my follow-up is, before you spoke about how China has tripled the amount of business they're doing in Africa compared to what the US used to do. And one of the things you also mentioned is that to best understand the market, you have to be on the ground. So can you give some advice other than healthcare in things that US entrepreneurs, US capital allocators should look into or do in order to gain a foothold or expand their reach on the continent?
And not just any gas, methane gas that is being used for cooking in Africa. If you can put your mind to exporting this petroleum gas from Texas or from any parts of the United States into Africa, that's a growing sector. Many of the countries. I'm from a region in Uganda where climate change has impacted some of the people living on the hills. The point is this: we have a real opportunity to help climate change by exporting methane gas or petroleum gas to the region. That's a real growing sector. Last year, in June or July, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs put a paper on its website admitting that it couldn't compete on culture, cash. They could not compete. And guess what? China is still a developing country. I'm just saying those are some of the aspects that we should focus on. Thank you.